Well. I am back on the saddle here with another edition of Mic Drop, made possible by the Believe Network and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including SiriusXM. I'm Mike Asti, and I took a couple week hiatus, welcomed a new child, a second daughter. I am now a super girl dad, of course, so dealing with a newborn put this show, really a lot of my career, on pause, but I'm now getting back in the swing of things. And I've been writing still. And I've still been, of course, on social media. My opinions have still kind of been out there. And I even touched on a little bit of these topics on past shows. But whether they're right now relevant or not, I want to retouch on them here to kind of kick off a now post second daughter edition here, the birth of my new baby girl Lucy, to add with Mila, now a new dawning of an era here on this show, on Mic Drop and every other show, and in my career, as now I have two little girls. So now with Lucy a part of the fold here, this is the first Mic Drop post Lucy's birth, and I want to touch on three very, very hot button Pittsburgh sports topics of the past 2 weeks while I was gone. Again, still writing about it, tweeting about it, and maybe put on some shows. I know actually I touched on one of these topics on my last Mic Drop episode prior to the hiatus, when I had my friend and colleague Will Graves of the Associated Press on. And the point of having him on was not to initially talk about this. He kind of segued into it becoming a debate, and that's Andrew McCutchen and whether or not he deserves the Hall of Fame. As I was talking with Will about the Pete Rose news, since, of course, Will is a Hall of Fame voter, Pete Rose becoming eligible now. We're not going to make this a Pete Rose episode here. I can go on and on about that, and you can go back in the archives here, everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. I still have that memorized. And of course, here on the Believe Network page of Mic Drop, to find that last episode with Will. Long talk about Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, my defense of Shoeless Joe, of course, the Hall of Fame, and then he slid in maybe Kutch being eligible. That started a firestorm in Pittsburgh with a lot of people saying, okay, does Kutch deserve it? Some saying yes. I wrote about how that's just asinine and not fair. I love Kutch as much as the next guy. He does not deserve it. He's not going to get in. But I want to touch on that at the end of the show. Beginning of this show has to start off with what's still being talked about. It's just relevant in perpetuity. It's going to be evergreen, and it's going to help shows like this just churn content throughout the rest of the summer and certainly into the fall and winter. And that's Aaron Rodgers, as he is now officially a Pittsburgh Steeler. Ironically enough, the news that officially broke nationally that Aaron Rodgers was going to sign and finally told the Steelers he was coming and he would then show up a day or so later happened on the exact same day, June 5th, 2025, a day that will live in infamy. When my daughter was born, when Lucy was born, Aaron Rodgers decided to officially become a Pittsburgh Steeler. And you also had the public breakup of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So the president and a billionaire going at it, Aaron Rodgers a Steeler, and then my daughter. You can pick which one you think is maybe more of the major news story of that day in history, but I'll rank them how I will. And we also are going to talk about the Penguins hiring a new head coach and why this man is fine, but he's not going to be the head coach whenever this team becomes a contender again. And that's going to be a bit. That's going to be a while. It's not going to be right now. I am obviously broadcasting live here across social media on my social media pages there on X and on YouTube, which I'll have to get back into that as well. So feel free to comment below. I may go to some of your comments. Otherwise, I'm going to drop some of my takes here on this show, get back in the swing of things, and then try to get guests back on here on Mic Drop. And if you follow me elsewhere on programs coming up in the coming weeks and months as well. And no, there's no baby behind me bouncing, so I don't know if you're going to see Lucy here, but there's pictures of her on social media. They're out there, so you can find them that way. So to start things off, Aaron Rodgers is a Steeler, and as I was writing about going into it, it's possible to have multiple opinions here. I know that's hard for some fans and even some media colleagues of mine to do. You find one and you just ride that to the end. It's possible to have multiple here. So one of them is it's definitely an upgrade for the Steelers from what they've had in recent years. This is not breaking news. This should not be a shocking development or even controversial or hot take at all. They've been dealing with a quarterback room really since the end of Ben when he was a shell of his former self and they couldn't protect him to last year. Aaron Rodgers, currently speaking right now, 41 years old, is an upgrade from last year's Russell Wilson, last year's Justin Fields, even though he's young. And yeah, we can get into that maybe he should have been the guy, but they didn't do it. They kind of fumbled that and, lowballed him. I actually thought Fields bringing him back would have made sense, but it didn't happen. But even Fields at that point, you don't know what you're going to get. Very young, but still. And just speaking 2025 and what we're going to see, Rodgers an upgrade from Fields, what you could see there. And they will meet right away to start the NFL season. Upgrade from what the Steelers had in Russell Wilson, of course. Younger than Rodgers now, tail end of his career. Maybe he'll argue for the Hall of Fame too, but not Rodgers. And Rodgers still outplayed him last year with the Jets, despite a rough season overall. Certainly an upgrade from Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, who's back on the team, of course, and now the backup, and what the Steelers have had. So 100%, Rodgers is an upgrade. If you're trying to win in 2025, Rodgers, even when he'll become 42 in December, is still an upgrade from what the Steelers have had. That's just the case. Some want to deny it. Some want to say, okay, the picks were a little higher than maybe you'd like or what he normally put up the last couple years when he played. Of course, he had that injury season where he barely played or didn't really play at all, or hurt a few plays in and then out the whole year, his first year with New York. But even going to last year and the end of the Packers, yeah, the picks have been higher than what MVP Rodgers was doing, and he's not MVP Rodgers anymore. Will never be again. And that's not who the Steelers are getting. And I'll get to why that needs tempered a bit as well. But he's still an upgrade. I mean, Aaron Rodgers currently, right now, from what he did in New York, certainly at the end of that season in 2024, when he finally got healthier, he was a year removed from the surgery. They say it takes a year and a half to really get going. Once he really found his footing again, and that team wasn't going anywhere, but he was starting to play better. Okay, flirting with 4,000 passing yards, over 3,800. Did have the touchdowns. Yeah, the picks are a little higher than what he wants, but there are quarterbacks out there that lock into being a starter that are younger, that even threw more than him. People throw the graphic all the time. The number is very similar to what Josh Allen put up, and he was the MVP. Now, yeah, Allen had a better year. He ran for more yards. He threw less picks. I'm not going to run amok and say he had a better year than Allen. Allen deserved the MVP. His team was better. He did more. People who throw that graphic up ignore the rushing yards and the touchdown interception ratio, which you can't do. But it also shows that Rodgers was better than what people think. That's just the case. Rodgers had a better year than what the narrative says. He did. He's an upgrade from what the Steelers have had, even at his age. So if you're a Steelers team that doesn't want to punt a year, doesn't want to ever rebuild, and I've argued they should probably, people have been arguing they should. If you ever want to go from 9-10 wins and lose right away to actually make a championship run again, which hasn't happened in a decade and a half, then you probably do need to endure a bad year or so. And maybe that'll be the end of Tomlin, and that's a whole show for another day that I've also touched on. But if you're the Steelers and you want to win right now, and we're just speaking on the QB position right now, and who's better and what it'll do in 2025, Rodgers is an upgrade from what they've had. However, he's also not good enough to take you to a championship level. Okay, Rodgers is not what he was in his prime with Green Bay, when even during those years, he only had the one championship, ironically, over the Steelers. Multiple years, he was the MVP and one and done right in the playoffs. Several times during his prime, he didn't even play well in the postseason, and his teams couldn't score points when he did in the regular season. So you could say Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but sometimes would shrink in the playoffs. The Steelers don't need that. Why would he all of a sudden have this great playoff game with the Steelers at 41, 42 years old when he wasn't really doing it, even when he was an MVP in his prime with Green Bay? And separate from Rodgers himself, who, again, is an upgrade from what they've had, but not nearly what he was and not nearly good enough when you're comparing him to Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes in the conference and in the division, who are still way younger than him and playing better right now, the Josh Allen, as I mentioned. the team also isn't there. Okay, question marks defensively, getting older at certain spots. They have DK Metcalf now there at receiver for Rodgers, but George Pickens is gone, so you could still double cover DK Metcalf. And I've touched on, I knew that was going to happen. I wrote about it, Todd did shows, knew that was going to happen. They weren't going to pay two receivers, but nonetheless, they got one, and they can double cover the man and make it harder. Najee Harris is gone. Say what you want about him, but the running game now is in flux, and they need someone to step up again. Jaylen Warren did it last couple of years, but you need more than one back, and they don't really have that now. Major question there. Freiermuth could be that elite tight end that I thought he would be years ago when they drafted him. He's a solid player. He's a great dude. He's a solid player. He's a consistent, solid player. Does he take the step to become elite? Maybe he will with Rodgers, but that's still a question. And secondary, D-line, O-line, offensive line needs to protect him or nothing's going to work, of course. That was an issue that some believe got him hurt at the beginning of his Jets tenure. So they're just not a championship team. I mean, they're just far from it. There are several teams better than them. They're probably the third best team in the division, benefiting off the Browns mess. And even if the Bengals have their slow start to the years that they've been doing, at best, they're the second best team in the division. They get in the playoffs and then lose right away. They're not nearly the Ravens. They're not nearly Buffalo. They're not the Chiefs, of course. You always never can count out. The Chargers are likely going to be very, very good. The Texans could get back. Some people are falling in love with what the Patriots are doing. The Dolphins have kind of been up and down. They're not right, setting the world on fire, but they're there. That's just the AFC. I mean, that's just the AFC alone. Denver, of course, made the postseason with Bo Nix. So there are teams that maybe they're better than and have better situations than, for sure, that are currently in the conference. The Raiders are obviously doing a whole new thing with Geno and Pete Carroll. So who knows if they come out of nowhere. There's usually a team that does that. And that's just, again, the conference alone. They're not making some championship run. This team isn't good enough, even though they have upgraded at quarterback. So it's very possible to simultaneously believe they are upgrading at QB with Aaron Rodgers, like him or not, personally, but they're upgrading at quarterback on the field with Rodgers, but they're still not going to be a championship team. So if your mindset is, oh man, they got this former 4-time MVP, future Hall of Famer, top 10 all time, top 5, whatever you want to say, slinger of the football, it's a major upgrade. They haven't had it. He's the leader on the field. And if he's healthy, they're going to make a run like what people thought the Jets would do when he first got there. It's just not going to happen. This is 2 years later. The Jets tenure clearly didn't go like people thought and got excited for. And Rodgers wasn't even making championship runs on the regular when he was an MVP. He made one, and it was way early in his career and never even got back to Super Bowl after that. So pressure on him and pressure on Tomlin to do that again. They both haven't done it in a while, but that's just not happening. So you are upgrading. I mean, it's also a bridge scenario. I mean, when you think about it, it's not that much of a risk unless you just hate the man personally. And I'm annoyed by him at times as much as anybody, to be honest. But if you're just upgrading on the field, you pay him the money. He'll probably hit the incentives. Maybe he doesn't, and you save some. This is not like they're locked in for 3 or 4 years. This is a short-term thing. He is a bridge, like it or not, if you're Rodgers, but he's not going to be there into the future. And if they go to the playoffs and they win a postseason game, which I do think, to get to that, I think that's in play. So if you want to call me a Rodgers believer just simply for that, I don't think they're lifting the Lombardi trophy, but I do think they can win a playoff game. With Aaron Rodgers being a playoff upgrade, being from what they've had in terms of quarterbacks who've led them into the postseason, with a quarterback upgrade alone, no matter what else is going on with the team and there are questions there abound, the Steelers could at minimum at least do what they've been doing when they've had worse quarterbacks and slide into the playoffs as a wild card with 9 wins, with 10 wins. That barely over 500 winning season type of thing, but go nowhere in the playoffs. They could do that 100%. And then once you're there, they have a better quarterback. And yeah, he's not won playoff games when he should have earlier in his career, but it's in play. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm not putting money down on it. I'm not over there at DraftKings or FanDuel or wherever. But if you call me a Rodgers believer for believing that is a bar, sure. I think the Steelers have an ability to get in the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers as a upgrade from what they've had and then win a playoff game. Do they have an ability to win a championship or make a deep playoff run or go to the Super Bowl or even be in the AFC title game? No. I'm not predicting any of that. The team's not good enough. And even with Rodgers being an upgrade, he's not good enough in comparison to the young, established quarterbacks, elite quarterbacks of today. He's not on par at all. But he can win one playoff game, and they can have a better chance in that game. They've been getting in the playoffs without him with worse quarterback play, and they had no chance in those games, but you give a better quarterback, maybe they have a chance in those games. Maybe they get a better matchup. Maybe they win more games in the regular season. Maybe they avoid Buffalo right away. Who knows? So that is in play. I think they can win a playoff game. And if they do that, even though it's not a championship run and he's not going to be there forever, then it's a success. They're getting more out of it than what the Jets freaking got out of him. They didn't even get one playoff appearance out of him. And separate from that, Steelers haven't won a playoff game since 2016. Mike Tomlin's on a playoff drought. Him and Rodgers are kind of tied with playoff disappointments, in the last decade. And Steeler fans, if they get one playoff win, even though they want more and expect way more, it would at least turn the corner a little bit from the angst of the last several years. And I'm not saying we would forgive the underachieving, even though Tomlin's also overachieved at times. And again, I can do a whole show on how they maybe should have pulled the trigger years ago, like the Eagles did with Andy Reid, and let him go to the Hall of Fame, and then get somebody else and change the course of maybe him and the franchise, even though they don't fire coaches. But here, back to reality, because they're not going to do it and didn't do it. You have Tomlin looking to win that freaking first playoff game in a long damn time. That franchise needs to. It's an historic franchise with titles. They need to get a freaking playoff game. They need to win a playoff game. You can't just get in and have no chance every year. That's just not going to work for this fan base. So if they get in and win a playoff game with Rodgers in one season and that's it, and that's all you get out of the year, that's a gigantic win. That's a gigantic win. I mean, it really would change the vibes. It would be a positive. It'd be more than what they've done, the last 9 years now, 8 years now. Lord. So that's all possible. If you call me a Roger believer because I think they can win a playoff game, fine. I don't think they can win a title, but a playoff game, yeah, I think they can. And that then also will seg me a little bit into TJ Watt, which I didn't put in the headline, but I do want to discuss here. Because the Steelers brought in Aaron Rodgers and they're in clearly win now mode. And even from what I know, having covered the franchise, covered the team in Pittsburgh media circles, and still having sources there, even though I'm not doing it on a beat every day anymore, they're going to pay him. They're going to bring him back. They're going to give him the deal. Is he going to break Myles Garrett and numbers? I don't know that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're going to pay him. They're going to bring him back. It's going to be a big number. It's going to be a market value number. It's probably going to set some type of record. None of that would surprise me. They're not going to, he's not going to take some incredible hometown discount, nor are they going to be able to lowball him, or else they'll never be bringing him back. But I do believe he will be back. He will get his money. He will be happy. He will be a career Steeler. He will go in the Hall of Fame someday as a career Steeler. Will he have a title to show for it in a championship and be part of that Steeler lore in terms of the Super Bowl teams of history? It's likely doubtful, and that maybe we'll get into what I'm going to get into in a second. But nonetheless, he'll be back. And because you bring in Rodgers and you're in this win now mode, and maybe you'll be able to go get the quarterback in the draft next year, but right now you're in win now mode. This is just what's going to happen. That's a tea leaf for you. This is going to happen. They're going to bring TJ Watt back. They're not going to sign Rodgers, be in win now mode, and then all of a sudden rebuild by not bringing TJ Watt back. And without a deal, that would be what they're signaling right now. And again, back to Rodgers, as I just said, they can go get the quarterback of the future next year if it doesn't work and he has a horrible year and they don't win a playoff game. Or they can work a trade because they now have draft capital to do that. I know some are screaming that that's their plan. You bring in Rodgers, you try to win a playoff game, whether you do it or not. You go next year in the draft, and if you're picking 15, 16, 17 again in that middle portion that never can get you that franchise guy, you finally work a quarterback trade and then move up and then finally get that guy. Maybe that's what they're thinking, because that would make it easier to get that guy, even though franchise quarterbacks have been taken at the end of the first or in later rounds for sure. But maybe go get a slam dunk guy or who you believe to be that, not Kenny Pickett again, because that didn't work, of course, and you do it in a trade because you have the capital. So that could be their thought. 100%. I totally buy that. I totally think that is their thought, to be honest. I think that's what they're going to do. It's what Omar Khan's going to do is next year either be in a better spot for QB because this season sucked, or work a trade and move and finally move up for a quarterback when the draft is in Pittsburgh and they finally get that first round QB that maybe actually works, since Pickett did not in the Steel City as a host for the NFL draft, as special as that'll be. So I think that is their plan. That's what their mindset is, and maybe what will happen. But I, like some other fans, in terms of what maybe would help the franchise overall, would be fine, and I've write about this too, of not paying TJ Watt, not bringing him back for a long-term deal. Tell him that you've been a great player. You're going to go in the Hall of Fame someday. You're going to be remembered as a career Steeler. But during your heyday and individual accolades and pursuing sack records and defensive player of the years, Steelers didn't win a playoff game with you. So why are we now shelling out all this money for an older player who's going to be missing more games when we're not a championship caliber team? We need to rebuild. And even if they do that QB plan that I detailed and get their guy next year in the draft in Pittsburgh, a lot more is needed to actually win a championship as well. So he would give you a lot. And we've seen franchises, when you trade that cornerstone player and get a haul back, there's still value there that you would be able to fully rebuild and maybe could then get on a title run. That's what I would do. They're not going to do it. I've been writing about it. The Rodgers thing certainly signals the win now, which we always knew they were going to do. They're going to pay him. He will be back. He'll be there for a while. He won't likely get a ring. Rodgers will be there 1 year. Maybe another quarterback will come in and be that franchise guy and lead Watt to the title. Maybe Cam Hayward too, if he's still around. I don't know if I buy that, but I do believe that's their plan to get that QB next year. It'll be a deeper class. There will be guys there available, and maybe they could right away make a run like they did early on with Big Ben in his career. And they had a much more of a stacked team then than they do now. There are issues here. Mic drop again here, back with you after the birth of my second daughter. So back on the mic drop grind, dropping the mic and delivering the hot takes on some recent Pittsburgh sports topics here during my 2-week hiatus. Again, mic drop with Believe on Sirius XM and available everywhere you get your podcast. You can also find me at Mike Asti 11 across social media. And I don't see anything here on the chat. I am broadcasting live. Normally get some action here, but it's been a minute. So shaking the rust off myself. Before I get into McCutchen in the Hall of Fame, since I already did discuss it with Will, and we have a whole show where he kind of dropped it in and I went back at him, but I'd love to do a whole show on that with Will, since he is a voter, and we are on two separate sides of that coin. And Will really did ignite the debate. I got to give him credit. It really was on his own, as then it went wild. And of course, McCutchen hit some milestones, and I'm not going to talk about how bad the Pirates are, and they're a little better than they were with Don Kelly now in the fold, and he'll be the manager permanently, I almost bet. But you know, they're not going anywhere either. There's still been losses there, but we'll touch on McCutchen Hall of Fame and why he's just not getting in Cooperstown. It's just not going to happen. In a moment, before we do, I want to touch on something where the Penguins finally brought in their new coach. So the Penguins have a new coach, and the ironic thing here is that while it's a first-year coach and an opportunity for, you know, maybe to rebuild and maybe to make something happen, and you still have Crosby in the fold, and colleague Josh Yowie reporting that Malkin's not going to be there long-term, but likely one more year. They're just not going to offer him more, and that had to eventually happen. So, okay, not too surprising there. Maybe you could put something together. Maybe you could move some mountains there, but this is a rebuilding franchise. So rebuilding franchise, they're still in kind of a cellar mode. That was clear the last couple of years. They're not really even a playoff team from recent memory. Even when they got in years ago, they didn't really go anywhere. Crosby's still elite. Crosby's still a great player. Crosby's still one of the best in the world. There's not enough around him at all, and really a major problem defensively more than anything else, even when they do score goals. The Erik Karlsson thing clearly didn't work out. That didn't help them ignite anything. And Malkin is a shell of his former self. So the news of him not being there forever, and you almost got to hope as a Pittsburgh guy that he just chooses to retire and ends up retiring as a career Penguin there the whole time, like Crosby, as rare as that is in this day and age in sports. But if he wants to go somewhere else, look, based on what I know from him and his wife and others who covered him really directly and wrote about this, he's going to try to get down to Florida. Okay. Does he want to jump on the back-to-back champs if Florida would cap it off and beat Edmonton, or even 3 straight final appearances? Regardless, they got a cup. Does he want to try to ignite things with Tampa Bay again in their previous mini dynasty? Does he want to do the Florida thing? It's seemingly where he always was looking at, where people always thought he'd end up if he ever did leave the Penguins. It maybe would probably not make sense, as Florida, the Panthers, of course, are eventually going to have to unload and can't pay everybody after this little mini dynasty. And, Tampa's kind of removed from when they were in that mode, with Stamkos and others having left. But maybe lightning in a bottle, a little shorter deal, let him go to Florida. His wife will be happy. Who knows? If he wants to increase his career and get some more numbers, that's fine. But it's not going to be with the Penguins after another season. But Dan Muse, an unknown to many, probably certainly casual fans. This is not a household name. This is not bring in a Joe Quenneville who's still coaching and has his 3 rings, as controversial as maybe his name would be. This is not, bringing in even a Rick Tocchet, who a lot of people know, even though, he hasn't had the major head coaching success, but he's known and he is that Penguin blood and people love him and feel like he's on the verge maybe becoming that. But that didn't happen either. And it ends up again being Dan Muse, who has a success at a lower level. He's a younger coach. This is his first opportunity to get a major NHL job. This is still a franchise with 5 Stanley Cups, so there's a lot a lot of history there and a lot of legendary players to hang your hat on, and there's a lot of reason why he'd want to do this. This is a great first job. You get to coach Sidney Crosby with a franchise that wants to win, that has proven it and can win when they really, really try. Unfortunately for him, they're not in win now or try mode. They're in rebuild mode. They're not going to really, really try. So I get why he'd want this. I think it's a good job for him to try to prove something. You hope it doesn't sink his career with his win-loss record not likely being great and playoff appearances not being there. It'll be interesting how long of a leash Kyle Dubas gives him. He's also a young GM trying to get it done and now picking up the steam with the Penguins after leaving the Leafs, but they're still a playoff team at least. Not the case with the Penguins. So this is rebuilding for Kyle Dubas as an executive, rebuilding now for Dan Muse as the head coach. How much longer does Dan get this opportunity to really turn this thing around? For me, and this, again, isn't really that much of a hot take, whenever the Penguins are good again, whenever they're a contender again, whenever they're a playoff team again, he won't be the coach. Okay, he'll get a couple years. They won't make the playoffs. Maybe they're crawling once. They'll lose right away. Crosby will be a Penguin forever. He's not ever going anywhere else, no matter who wants to talk about that in the national media or in the Canadian media. It's not going to happen. Whether or not Malkin's there is another thing. Him, Crosby, and Letang have had that long run together, which is unparalleled in pro sports today for sure, and a record in the NHL together. But that's just eventually going to end, of course. And, this team is just clearly not good enough anyway. Question mark in net, question mark all around. Depth is not there, certainly not near what it was in those cup teams. There's no Phil Kessel, bolstering a third line with elite play. It's just not going to happen. So they're not going to be that great. They're just not. I mean, this is a rebuilding situation. Everyone knows it. He took a job. It's a good job, but it's a rebuilding situation. And whenever they win, he won't be the guy. That's pretty much the case. Now, to wrap things up here, again, in my first mic drop back after the birth of my daughter. So again, mic drop here on Believe in Sirius XM. Andrew McCutchen for the Hall of Fame, question mark? Yeah, no. So I get people love McCutchen. I love him as much as the next guy. He tied over Clemente for home runs with the Pirates. He's moving up the ladder. His name is right up there with some Hall of Famers, certainly from what he's done with the franchise. So he gets brought up in this conversation, then revved up the engines. He's also having, a 7-homer, 26 RBI year, hitting 263. Not great, but this Pirate team has no offense, and he's actually been one of the better offensive players this year still at one of his older, he's 38 years old, older seasons. So tip of the cap for that. And he, you almost wish he would play more if you want him to win now. But obviously this Pirate team isn't going anywhere, so they probably should play him less and rebuild and get the younger guys up. But anyway, I'll digress on that. But tip of the cap, he's played well. He's hit okay. He's shown something. People like seeing him. He's the greatest Pirate of the generation. I saw that hot take of this generation of, he's not in the same generation with Bonds. It's a different generation of this generation, kind of more my generation, this century for sure. Then yeah, it is McCutchen. This century, this generation, he's the greatest Pirate. He did lead him on the greatest years. He won an MVP. There's something to be said there more than just, being the greatest Pirate when it's all been bad. He had that MVP year. They did make some playoff appearances despite not winning a series. Won a wild card game, of course. He's back now. He's going to be a Pirates Hall of Famer, 100%. But if you look at his career numbers, this is where it ends. There's no Hall of Fame debate here, guys. I mean, at least we shouldn't be having one unless you just want to admit being a homer and throwing him in because you like him. And that's what Will alluded to, that maybe he'll get some votes because he's so well liked, but which is true. There's a lot of opinions out there, and that's what the voting is. It's just human being opinions. It's not exactly 100% fair. And we've seen controversy with Hall of Fame, certainly with baseball's Hall of Fame, on whether or not they're doing the right thing with certain guys. But back to McCutchen, 326 home runs, a career 273 batting average, 1,261 runs scored, 1,121 RBI, does have 220 stolen bases, which is a nice number for a career as well. 367 OBP, 461 slug. Those are nice. Those aren't all world, but those are nice for a career. 827 OPS. His WAR, it wins above replacement, which is an analytical thing you got to look at now at 49.7. That's not bad at all. And there are Hall of Famers actually right around that or lower at different positions, not outfielders. But even so, it's not crazy. I mean, this is a Hall of very good career. The hit total of 2,209 and a little over 8,000 at bats to put this together. Of course, has the MVP, which is a big deal. 5 All-Star appearances, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 All-Star appearances, was top 5 in Rookie of the Year, the 4 Silver Sluggers, and does have a Gold Glove. That's a good career. Clap to him. It's Hall of very, very good, maybe even very good, not just Hall of very good. But he's not a Hall of Famer. He's not a Cooperstown player. His plaque's not going to be there, at least not on the wall. If you want to throw an artifact in because where he is in Pirates all-time ranks, and it is an historic franchise despite sucking most of my life, then okay, certainly should have a plaque on the wall at PNC Park. He's definitely a Hall of Famer for the franchise. There are some who are already in that have worse careers than what McCutchen has put up, even just with the Pirates. Again, the MVP and breaking that drought at that time. All a big deal. He was the best player on those 3 years, which are the best 3 years of the last 3 decades and more playoff seasons. And he won an MVP in baseball, in the National League, not just team MVP on the Pirates, of course. That hadn't happened since Bonds. And that's a rare feat. And there are Hall of Famers that don't have it or don't have multiple MVPs. And he does have one. But again, the overall career numbers as an outfielder, a primary outfielder, a primary center fielder, which is where we got to look. We're looking primary center fielder to compare him for all-time ranks here. You can say this is fair or not. We're talking Cooperstown. We're talking the Hall of Fame. We're talking comparing him to his primary position where he played most of his career and what other guys have done and whether or not that got them in or not. And the fact that it didn't get some of these guys I'm about to mention in is why McCutchen's a no-go. Those numbers don't jump out at you as guarantee Hall of Fame. He's not retiring tomorrow. Maybe they boost her up, but not that much. And when you look at Andrew Jones, who can't get in, he's not in yet. Maybe he'll eventually get in. He's kind of trajectory-wise getting up there over 60% now. Some feel he's even controversial as a borderline guy. His end of his career was so bad, I wouldn't even hate if he didn't get in, honestly. He's borderline Hall of very good as well. I think he should probably get in someday. 10 Gold Gloves to McCutchen's 1. He was the best center fielder in the game in the 90s. During a time of Ken Griffey Jr. roaming center field as the best player in the game. He's a little better defensively than Griffey, even though Jr. was, of course, a much better overall player. He had 10 Gold Gloves because Griff was in the American League. He was in the National League. They would have gave Griffey some awards if he was still doing it, of course, and wasn't hurt all the time with the Reds or was in the National League in the 90s. I'm sure they would have split some, but they were in 2 different leagues. So they both got 10, but only one outfielder in the sport's history has more Gold Gloves, and that's Roberto Clemente, who I talked about earlier that McCutchen's, passing in terms of on some all-time ranks with the Pirates. So Clemente has 12 Gold Gloves, not center field, but 12 Gold Gloves. Ken Griffey Jr. also has 10. Barry Bonds, I mentioned, 8 at left field. Andrew Jones has 10. So Andrew Jones has 10 Gold Gloves, more home runs, more slugging numbers than McCutchen, way higher on a lot of that. So you have Andrew Jones, who can't get in the Hall of Fame, with, and here they are, 434 home runs to McCutchen's 326. His batting average is worse, but again, all the slugging numbers are better. 1,289 RBI. That's again more than McCutchen. Does have 152 stolen bases that people wouldn't think of, not ahead of McCutchen, but more than people would have thought for him. An OBP of 337, a slug of 486, an OPS of 823, kind of similar to McCutchen there, but more home runs, more runs driven in, and 10 Gold Gloves. McCutchen won 10 Gold Gloves for Andrew Jones. Of course, also played on some World Series and pennant winning teams, has moments with big hits in that World Series right away in 96 with the Braves. Didn't win a ring, but was on some great teams. 10 Gold Gloves again. He also was top 10 in MVP voting twice, even though he did not win one like McCutchen. So if you give McCutchen the edge for the MVP, the overall numbers for Jones are there. His wins above replacement, to compare that for McCutchen, by the way, Andrew Jones, less at bats than McCutchen, only 7,500 or so, where McCutchen's already over 8,000. Andrew Jones wins above replacement is at 62.7. 62.7. Andrew McCutchen at 49.7. It's just not close if you want to get analytical with it, and Andrew Jones is not in yet. So how can you put McCutchen in and say he's going to get there when Andrew Jones is not even guaranteed the spot and is yet to get in, and people making him wait to get in? Will and his voters are making Andrew Jones wait. Will even admitted he voted for Andrew Jones once, but doesn't know if he's going to vote for him again the next time. And he's maybe thinking about McCutchen. That doesn't work if we're just talking on the field. That just doesn't work if we're just talking on the field. So Andrew Jones not getting in certainly right now makes McCutchen just a no-go and makes that make no sense overall. But separate from Andrew Jones, look to Jim Edmonds. Jim Edmonds is somebody who's off the ballot. Okay, Jim Edmonds off the ballot. Not going to be a Hall of Famer, dropped off the ballot 1 year in. More home runs than McCutchen at 393. Didn't get to 400, but 393. Batting average of 284, better than McCutchen. 1,199 RBI, 67 stolen bases, did steal some. OBP of 376, 527 slug, better than both Jones and McCutchen. An OPS of 903, also better than Jones and McCutchen. 1,000 less at bats than McCutchen, by the way, with better analytical numbers, more RBI, and a better batting average with more home runs. He does have rings. He also has big World Series moments like Andrew Jones did. And no, he didn't win an MVP like McCutchen did. That is a big feather in Andrew McCutchen's cap. He does have more Gold Gloves, several of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he has 8. He has 8 Gold Gloves. Roaming center field as well, kind of more into the 2000s after Jones stopped winning his, and was a top 15 in the MVP voting a couple times, was a top 5 in the MVP one. So he did actually contend for it despite not winning. And again, Andrew McCutchen has the MVP. That's a big deal. You want to have it. That helps you certainly in a Hall of Fame argument or an individual. Was he the best player in an individual year type of thing? McCutchen was once. Edmonds and Jones probably was not. But overall numbers career-wise, just on pure numbers, pure moments, pure analytics, pure percentages, pure on base, pure average, pure slugging, pure home runs, RBI runs, wins above replacement, of course, most of it is better for Andrew Jones and Jim Edmonds, who is off the ballot altogether. So he's not going to get in. Jones maybe will. Jim Edmonds is not. He barely got 5% of the vote, for crying out loud, and this body of work is way better than McCutchen, who's someone to put in. That doesn't make sense unless you're admitting you're worrying about off-the-field drama for Edmonds and different things with his personal life and affairs and all that. I mean, we're talking on-the-field baseball. This guy's wins above replacement is 60.4. 60.4. McCutchen's at 49.7, and you're arguing he's a Hall of Famer, and Edmonds is off the ballot in 1 year. How does that work? And the last one, which I put in the article for Yardbarker when I knocked this out of the park, and there are others we could bring up here, but for the purpose of this, these are the 3 that I really go towards. So Andrew McCutchen is just not going to get in the Hall of Fame, and he shouldn't get in the Hall of Fame. And if he gets in the Hall of Fame, you certainly got to get Andrew Jones in. You certainly got to somehow get Jim Edmonds in on some veteran committee ballot because he's off the damn regular ballot. And Torrey Hunter, too. Torrey Hunter, too. So you go back to the Gold Glove thing I talked about with Roberto Clemente having 12 and Andrew Jones and Griffey having 10. You know who also has 10? Freaking Torrey Hunter. Torrey Hunter has 10 Gold Gloves. Andrew McCutchen has been a Gold Glove center fielder, but these guys have 8, 10 Gold Gloves, and that's just defensively, and they also have better offensive numbers across the board in most of these cases when we're talking Jim Edmonds and Andrew Jones, who played around the same time as Andrew McCutchen, even though a little bit before. Torrey Hunter is even more of his contemporary. Torrey Hunter has a wins above replacement that is slightly still better than McCutchen. It's lower than Andrew Jones. It's lower than Jim Edmonds, but it's at 50.6. He's also had 1 year on the ballot and then dropped off like Jim Edmonds. He's not getting in either. And I'm not saying he should. By the way, I could argue myself, if I want to be tougher, I think Jim Edmonds is a borderline guy. I think Torrey Hunter is a borderline guy. I'd probably vote in Andrew Jones, but I wouldn't be mad if he doesn't get in. But if Andrew McCutchen gets your vote, then these three guys certainly got to get in because their resumes are just flat out better career-wise. A 50.6 wins above replacement, whereas McCutchen's at 49.7. Better than him there, even though the others are way better. A 277 batting average, also better. Runs scored at 1,296. 1,391 RBI, way more there. Just slightly less stolen bases at 195, whereas McCutchen got over 200. That's really, really close. An OBP of 331, 461 on the slug, and an OPS of 793. Those numbers are not jumping out the page, but still, it's not like it's way worse. At bats, 8,800 plus, so it's more than McCutchen right now. If I'm going to rank in terms of the candidacies here, Andrew Jones would have the best resume. Jim Edmonds would be 2. Torrey Hunter would be 3. And then McCutchen way down below, despite his MVP. Again, Torrey Hunter, 10 Gold Gloves. We're not talking 3 Gold Gloves to 1 here. It's 10 Gold Gloves for Torrey Hunter. You know, all the All-Star appearances, he has more of them there. He was a top 15 in the MVP voting once, another one top 20, and he actually does have one MVP, 6th place. So was in the top 10 one time. He didn't win a ring. He wasn't in major World Series moments, didn't play in one either, but does have a lot more playoff, games on his resume than McCutchen. And I'm not saying I'm going to, bang the drum for Torrey Hunter to get in Cooperstown either. I think him and Jim Edmonds are borderline guys. I think they deserve more votes than they got. They shouldn't have been off the ballot right away. I think Andrew Jones probably should slide in, and he probably will. But if they're not getting in, and none of them are in yet, and 2 of those 3 are never getting in unless the Veterans Committee does it for them, and Andrew Jones is still a question mark, then how are we talking McCutchen? So again, I love McCutchen as much as the next guy, and it's been a debate for a couple weeks now when I was off, and I just had to touch on it here on the show, despite writing about it. And, I want to do a whole thing with Will. I want to get further into it now just to give it its time since it's talked about so much. And I have even been on the Hall of Fame pod there, and we've talked to some people, that nobody would think would get in, like a Jason Kendall. Again, I don't think he deserves it either, but if you look at his career, it's better than what people think in terms of the debate. It's fun to debate guys' Hall of Fame candidacy, even if they really have no chance. I'm all doing it with McCutchen. I'd love to go on one of those shows and do it for McCutchen and have the debate. Maybe it's a better resume than what I'm even giving him credit for. But again, if Edmonds, Torrey Hunter, and Andrew Jones are not in, I don't see how you put in Andrew McCutchen. So again, I'm all ears to hear the debate. I'll have some fun and do the debate. I want to do that pod. I'm all about it. There's no way McCutchen's getting in with those guys not in, and 2 of those 3 are just never getting in. So again, I don't see how Andrew McCutchen's getting in. How many years are you going to put him on the ballot? How many votes is he going to get? Again, Edmonds and Torrey Hunter have better resumes. Jim Edmonds and Torrey Hunter have better resumes than Andrew McCutchen, and they got 1 year. How many years are you giving Andrew McCutchen? If I had to bet, he's on the ballot once and drops off. That's what should happen. He's a very good player, and that's it. That will do it for this edition of the show. I did hit it live. No one really joined me here. Saw some comments, but not worth, bringing them up here. They weren't really legit questions. I wanted to touch on some hot button Pittsburgh sports topics here the last couple weeks while I was out and not doing this show after my daughter was born. But we'll get back into the swing of things here with more guests, more shows, get fully more into my career here as we keep it moving in the coming weeks and months. And of course, you can find Mic Drop everywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. You can find it here on the Believe Network page, as this show is powered by the Believe Network still, and also available on SiriusXM with the Believe shows. So back into it. Again, this is where the Pittsburgh sports talk really, really is. Of course, they also cover the Mountaineers professionally with WV Sports Now and do a lot of national writing with the Yardbarker. So hit those spots up. But if you want Pittsburgh conversation, as I'm, a Pittsburgh journalist here, you can come to Mic Drop. I'll touch on some national things as well here on this show. And we're now back into it. So I just dropped the mic on what Pittsburgh's been talking about, even when I was out not doing shows. So feel free to comment on anything I discussed here on this show, and I will give you more content, more shows moving forward. So again, that'll be it for this program. That'll be it for Mic Drop here. And find me on social media if you want to, engage. But Aaron Rodgers, it's an upgrade. Not going to make my championship contender, but a playoff win. I'm a believer they can win a playoff game. That'll make it a success story. TJ Watt, I'd like the Steelers to finally rebuild and not do it, but they're going to bring him back. Don't freak out. Dan Muse, fine coach for the Penguins, but he won't be there whenever they start winning, and that's years away. And then Andrew McCutchen for the Hall of Fame. Great guy. Love watching him. Best of this generation, sure. Pirates Hall of Famer, yeah. Cooperstown, Baseball Hall of Famer, no chance at all, and doesn't deserve it based on who has better resumes than him and is not in.